What's your favorite no effing way story? Story 1. So my cousin and a group of close friends are spending a weekend in a cabin outside of Squamish, BC. On the drive up, they heard over the radio that a summer camp for special needs children near the cabin they were staying at had gone camping and had subsequently lost one of the kids, and a search party had commenced looking for him. They shrug it off as crappy news and continue with their trip, looking forward to an epic weekend. Fast forward to the next night. They're sitting around the campfire, having a good time, drinking and reminiscing about old times. One of their friends pulls out a bag of he'd been saving as a surprise and asks if anyone wants to make it a memorable night. Being the good Canadians they are, they ingest it after saying please and thank you first. About 3 hours later, one of their friends gets in his head that there are trolls in the woods, and he's going to find one if it takes him all night. Without any hesitation, he dashes off into the woods on his epic troll quest. From the point of view of Mr. Troll Hunter, he said he got about a good mile into the woods before he started seeing a bunch of moving lights off in the distance. He gets freaked out and takes off the other way. Still determined to find a troll, he continues. Lo and behold, he finds one, throws it over his shoulder, and heads back to camp. He returns to the cabin. By this point, everyone has gone to bed and he takes the troll into his room. He makes a nice little bed of blankets in his closet, lays the troll down in it, and proceeds to feed it a bowl of milk, because everyone knows trolls love milk. He shuts his closet and passes out. He wakes up the next morning, opens his closet to grab some clothes, and sitting in a bed of blankets is this 9-year-old kid with Down syndrome just staring up at him. He freaks out and decides he has to call the cops. He calls them and tells them he and his buddies were hiking through the woods the night before and found the missing kid from the nearby camp. The cops show up, commend him for being such an excellent citizen, and take the kid home. A few weeks later, he's in the paper and is awarded a key to the city for his heroism. Yeah, I know this is just an urban legend, but I'm an extremely gullible person and I believed my cousin when he told me it was his and his buddy's story. Whatever, I laughed when I heard it. Story 2. My fiancé, now husband, and I had talked about getting a pet. Growing up, I only had cats. As an adult, I am highly allergic to them, so we decided a dog would be best. I had no idea if I would even like having a dog since I've never played with one. I read up on caring for dogs and was super stoked that our town was going to have the annual pet expo soon. We went to it, hoping to get some information about breeds, adoptions, supplies, etc. The expo turned out to be pretty unhelpful, as most of the vendors were selling dog clothes and treats. As we were leaving, I noticed that there were a couple of booths on the outskirts of the expo that we missed. As we walked toward them, I saw that one had a couple of brownish dogs. The smaller of the two caught my eye. It was just the most perfect puppy I had ever seen. It was brindled, and his fur looked like a brown tiger pelt. Long, graceful legs, a big ruff, and a sharp face and ears like a fox's. His big brown eyes were full of intelligence. I talked to the woman running the booth and found out that they were a non-profit rescue organization run solely by volunteers. She informed us that only the larger of the two dogs was available for adoption. I petted the little guy for a bit and left, but I found myself thinking about him a lot over the next few weeks. I hoped I would be able to find one like him when we were ready to adopt. I spent the next few months preparing to get a dog, renegotiating the lease to allow for a pet, getting supplies, researching foods, and reading up on healthcare and first aid. Finally, we were ready to find a dog to adopt. We went to a humane society and struck out week after week. We just could not find a good match. None of the dogs felt like they would fit our little family. One day after yet another disappointing day at the Humane Society, I was half-heartedly browsing Craigslist pet ads when I saw that there was an adoption event a few towns away. We went, expecting to be disappointed. Sure enough, the dog at the event were not much better. Too energetic, too small, too big, and too loud. I gave up and started walking back to the car when a white van pulled into the parking lot. My husband said we should stick around just in case the van was bringing more dogs. Sure enough, the driver got out and let out a single little brown dog. I immediately started walking toward the van, which was parked about 100 feet away. My heart knew well before my brain could register that I recognized that dog. As I walked faster and faster to the van, I remembered where I had seen him before. I shouted to my husband, "It's him! It's my dog!" It turns out that he was the dog from the expo and the last of his litter to find home. No one else wanted him because he was shy and looked unusual. I thought he was beautiful. Within the hour, he was buckled up in the backseat in his doggy seat belt on his way to his new home. If something is meant for you, it will happen. Story 3. My roommate had a huge fish tank with 4 cichlids in it. One of them, the pink one, was mean and used to pick on the other ones. I hated him. One night, I had a dream that I caught him with a net, threw him in a pan with some butter, fried him up, and ate him. The next morning, I walked by the fish tank and looked in to discover the pink one was gone. I freaked out and looked all over the tank for him. He's nowhere to be found. When my roommate got home from work, I told him about my dream and that the pink cichlid was missing. He looked at me, visibly shaken, and said, "Dude, I'm going to start locking my bedroom door at night." Days and weeks go by. I'm truly disturbed that I'm capable of sleep eating my roommate's pets. Finally, I was so overcome with anxiety that I decided to scour the tank, CSI style, looking for clues. I pressed my face against every square inch of the tank, desperate to salvage a shred of sanity. After what must have been at least an hour, something tiny catches my eye under a large piece of coral in the back corner. I reached in and pulled out the coral, only to discover the bones of the pink cichlid. It had been wedged between the rocks and the coral on the bottom of the tank. Somehow, the other 3 cichlids had eliminated the pink one and telepathically framed me for it. Not only did they frame me, they got me to confess. Story 4. A few years ago, I made plans to go see Nine Inch Nails in Massachusetts and their final tour with a friend of mine along with his 2 friends from New York. When the trip ends, the MIA song Paper Planes comes on and 3 of us start singing along, making all the noises obnoxiously, which annoyed the 4th guy, Shane. He tells us that he hates the song, which ended up being a bad idea because my friend found and purchased the single for that song, complete with 5 remixes later that day. We headed into town a couple of days early, so there was plenty of annoying Shane with the song, along with making jokes about how maybe if we ask nicely, Trent Reznor will play it at the concert. The day of the concert comes, and as the opening act, Street Sweeper Social Club, plays their set, the singer announces the next song isn't on our album, and launches into a cover of, you guessed it, Paper Planes. It took a few moments to sink in because I really couldn't believe that it was happening. It was too perfect. Here, we had been annoying him obnoxiously for the entire trip with this song, which the rest of us genuinely liked for the record, only to have the opening act of the concert played out of nowhere. God just wanted in on the fun and messed with a friend on a bigger scale. If you think that was epic, check out what happened to the paramedic in Story 7. Story 5. My mate's mom is a doctor, who assisted in the following, which I thought was an urban myth. An 18-year-old guy was playing rugby league, and after a massive tackle, his hip was cleanly dislocated. They called the paramedics to come, who arrived ridiculously fast considering the injury, and proceeded to pop the hip back into place. The guy was screaming already from the pain of the dislocation, but when they popped it back in, he lost it. Totally. Screaming and wailing like nothing else that they had heard. As it turns out, in the process of the dislocation, a lot of the muscles around that general area had pulled, including the nuts. One of them had gotten caught in the hip joint when it was popped back in. After they got him to the hospital, they diagnosed the issue and had to re-dislocate it to get it back out. Also, if anyone feels bad for the guy, he had run out on his then-pregnant girlfriend about 3 weeks before. He deserved it. Story 6. Here's mine. I was walking my older dog one night around 10 p.m. I had him off leash since it was late and we were in a neighborhood, no one to bother. I kept track of him for poo duty as he sniffed around and we were approaching an intersection. The house we were walking along was 20 feet from the sidewalk, where I was, and was edged by very large juniper bushes, which he was checking out. Suddenly he stopped and dove into a bush. This was odd, considering he was nearly 10 years old and although he's active, he's not crazy like that. Out of the bush comes some sort of snarl scream and all I could think was, damn, he got a raccoon. And out leaps an immature mountain lion, at least 20% larger than my dog. It runs down the road and I stand there terrified, yelling, no way! As he comes back to me, wagging his tail like he's the greatest dog ever, which is very likely considering that cat was much bigger than me. It was probably the most well-earned rawhide bone he's ever earned. Story 7. I'm not sure if this counts, but my friend works as a paramedic in Chicago. She was in the ambulance when they got a call to go to the apartment complex where there had been a shooting, possibly gang-related, I think she said. They got to the apartment and found a young kid who had been shot in the legs. She started treating him, seeing that he had 3 holes in his pants. She assumed he had 3 gunshot wounds. But when she inspected his legs, she only found 2 wounds. She searched for the other wound but couldn't find it. She asked the kid, where else were you shot? He said, nowhere. She explained the holes in his pants and he said, no, that's from the last time I was shot. She was frustrated by this and told him to get new pants. I think she said he ended up being okay. Story 8. When I was younger, I worked for an excavation and demolition company for the summer. We were gutting an old mill in New Hampshire to turn into high-end lofts. One of the workers was standing on top of some scaffold about 12 to 15 feet up, using a handheld handsaw to cut through a large pipe. As he was cutting, a strap supporting the pipe broke, letting it drop down and pinch the blade. This made the saw shoot back towards him and push him off the scaffold. This guy did a complete backflip while holding a working saw from over 10 feet up. He landed on his feet and saw the saw was still running. Everyone stopped and stared at him for about 5 seconds before we went back to work. That's some awesome Jackie Chan moves. If you're into these out-of-this-world unbelievable threads, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more. Story 9. Not too amazing, but still pretty cool. After college, I sent out some resume like anyone else would. I got an interview at some BS company selling some crappy stuff. Anyway, while waiting to be interviewed, I looked over and saw this guy around my age waiting to be interviewed as well. However, this kid looked familiar, and I couldn't put my finger on how I recognized him. Anyway, I got a call the next day saying I got the job and would be there the next day for training. The next day I got there for training and that kid was there for training as well. Finally, we all had to introduce ourselves. As it turns out, the kid was Rab himself from... Note that his real name is Chris Rab. I then proceeded to talk and hang out with Rab the entire day. As it turns out, he's a nice guy. He's also hilarious, by the way. Out of curiosity, I asked him why he needed this job if he was on MTV. Rab then proceeded to inform me that MTV would make you famous but not rich. He said only the creators of got some dough, like Knoxville and Bam. I live right outside of Philadelphia on the Jersey side, so I guess it makes sense that he would be in the area because he's from Westchester, PA, which is only an hour away. True story. Story 10. My story is a quiet, simple one that is sure to be buried. I was at an all-girls house party and we were playing a board game. My team was down by a solid turn. The game was one where you gave clues to your teammates and they had to figure out the answer before the timer went out. It was similar to that old TV show about the $100,000 pyramid. Like I said, we were down to one spot in the board. The clue giver only had time to say one word before the timer went off. All she said was, he. I blurted out, Tom Cruise. I was right. We won the game and the other team accused us of cheating. Story 11. One winter I went sledding down a popular hill in my hometown with my brother and his wife. At the bottom of the hill, there was a frozen pond. My sister-in-law hopped in the back of my sled, sitting backward, and we went down together. Due to the extra mass, we started going way faster than I expected when I noticed we were heading right toward a little kid. I just couldn't maneuver out of the way, so I leaned forward and scooped the kid right up, holding him up like Simba. And I realized we were still about to slide into a frozen pond, so I bailed out and held the kid as high over my head as I could. I stood up, set the kid down, and looked around for his parents. When I saw a big dude coming at me, I was like, oh no, here we go. Then he got closer and I realized it was one of my closest friends. That kid I ran into was his son, whom I babysit regularly. I thought to myself, no effing way, and gave him a big hug. The kid said he thought it was awesome. Holding him up like Simba. I imagined this with the background song Circle of Life. Story 12. This happened back in my undergrad days, on the day of economic midterm. Because the lecture hall is so large and the class is about 300 students, the professor needs a microphone to speak to the class. So he's in front of the class, giving his whole speech about the exam. 50 questions of multiple choice. Make sure to write your name in the scanner, turn it in here when you're done, etc. Finally, he bids us all good luck and leaves the lecture hall for his office, which is in the adjacent room. Well, he didn't realize that he left his microphone on, so while the entire class was silent during this exam, we all listened to the events that unfolded inside his office. We hear the brief, muffled conversation he's having with a female TA in our class. Then the conversation stops and it becomes painfully evident that they were getting naughty. The quiet sounds of the TA were magnified by the speakers in the lecture hall. The entire class remained silent, no one wanting to be the first to make some kind of move. Finally, the professor yells loudly, "Oh, damn!" and the microphone abruptly shuts off. 20 minutes later, the professor walks out into the lecture hall as if nothing happened. He was fired a week later. Story 13. More of a big coincidence than anything. In the first week of college in my junior year, sometime during the day, I lost the dongle on my laptop charger. I looked everywhere for it and couldn't find it anywhere. I got back to the room that night and my roommate asked how my day was. I tell him about losing the dongle and looking everywhere, and he gets this weird look on his face. He looks at me and says, "Was it black and about this long?" while holding his finger apart. I tell him yes, but I figure he's just messing with me. He asked, "Did it have a yellow tip with a little white strip attached to it saying HP?" I tell him yes, but I still figure he's messing with me. He looks at me and says, "Dude, I'm so sorry, but when I was leaving the cafeteria this morning, I saw this little black thing on the sidewalk. I picked it up and started looking at it. For some reason, and I can't explain why I did it, but as I was passing the dumpster, I just blurted out, 'Sucks for this guy,' and threw it right in." He insisted he wasn't messing with me, so we put on some crappy clothes and went dumpster diving. It only took about 20 minutes to find it. Of the 2,000 plus students that attend my university, the person who found it and threw it away was my roommate. Story 14. My brother's friends are twins and are friends with the Bush twins. Makes for a cute photo op. Well, several years ago, they were invited to their birthday party at the White House. It was a gag gift party. As they were going through the metal detectors, the Secret Service inspected the box for the presents, pulled out 2 giant black adult toys. They stared down at my brother's friends before proceeding to burst out laughing. I still can't believe they went through with it. The truly giant nuts. Gag gifts indeed. Story 15. My brother's girlfriend told us this story about a girl who she said she used to go to high school with. This girl would go on these trips, or she would just travel during the day by canoe, camp out at night, and then travel again to a different place. The name for it is escaping me right now. Anyway, she brought a waterproof disposable camera to take pictures of the scenery and stuff as she went. Her trip went fine, and she got home and decided to go develop her pictures. As she's looking through them, she freaks out as she discovers that on her camera is a picture of her sleeping in her tent every single night. The reason this freaked her out so much was that she went on that trip, along with all other ones she'd been on, completely alone. Story 16. My sister was driving down the street at 45 miles per hour with her windows open when a deer ran into the street. Instead of hitting the steer, the deer jumped into her car through the window and landed with its head in the foot part of the passenger seat side and its bum in the headrest. The deer was freaked out and nervously crapped all over the car. My sister pulled over, several people stopped to help her and ask her where the deer was. She just stood there screaming, "It's in the car! It's in the car!" A helpful man opened the door, pulled the deer out, and the deer bounded off like nothing happened. For imagery, she was driving a late 1990s Ford Escort at the time. No one believes this story, but it is 100% true. Story 17. The day after I proposed to my wife, we were at the Science Fiction Museum in Seattle, Washington. There's an exhibit that is a giant tumbler full of yellow beads, like thousands of yellow beads, and one black one. It is meant to illustrate the unlikelihood of finding life in the universe. I called her over to tell her how cool it was, and she just pointed at it casually and said, "There's the black one," and she has continued to amaze me every day since. Good times. Story 18. Back in 2006, my brother and I were in Berlin, just traveling around. These two Russian girls asked us in Russian, confused. We replied in English, saying nothing. Then, in German, it turns out they just wanted someone to take their picture. We obliged, then get talking and hang out for the rest of the day. After dinner, we said goodbye and parted ways. Fast forward to 2010. I'm using Live Mocha to learn Russian, and out of boredom, I clicked the link to review English submissions. I found one of the girls practicing ordering food in a restaurant. I saw the display picture and thought, this girl is hot. I clicked her profile and I thought, okay, this girl looks familiar. I sent her a message and we started exchanging this and that. Wouldn't you know it? It was the same girl from Berlin. We got together over the summer in Holland and I think she's the one. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. What's the most insane coincidence you've experienced? Story 5 is unbelievable. See you in that video.